Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's conversation with artist Lesley Vance and interim chief curator and curator of contemporary art, Margaret Andera. My name is Bridget Globensky, and I'm senior director of education, and glad to be here to welcome you all tonight. It's nice to start coming back and being alive in the museum, so this is great. This event is part of the Expert Series. It's a program that welcomes renowned scholars and artists to the museum for a deeper dive into an exhibition, a work of art, or a theme. And tonight we're highlighting our permanent collection and specifically the recent acquisition of Untitled by our guest, Lesley Vance. This work, currently on view just around the corner in the galleries, was purchased with funds from Tony and Sue Krausen in memory of Riva Schrovers. We would like to thank them for making this purchase possible and to thank the Milwaukee Art Museum's Contemporary Art Society for sponsoring tonight's program. So, thank you, everyone. Before I introduce our speakers, I would like to highlight some upcoming programs. Our next Expert Series will be on May 12th, right here in Lubar Auditorium. Artists Derek Adams and Dr. Andrea Brown of the University of Chicago and Director of Arts and Public Life discuss urban planning, Black communities, and art in conjunction with On-Site, Derek Adams, and Our Time Together. Then our next program is on May 19th, and that's the Haberman Local Luminaries. That will be held downstairs in the exhibition, Shifting Perspectives, Landscape Photographs from the Collection. The Haberman Local Luminaries brings together a set of cross-disciplinary Milwaukeeans to share 10-minute reflections on works of art in a featured exhibition. And it's always so interesting to hear about a work of art through the lens of a different discipline, so I highly recommend those. These events take place annually, and they honor the late William Haberman, who was the former president of the Hertzfeld Foundation. Then bring the whole family down for a block party on May 21st. Enjoy free activities inspired by the exhibition Derek Adams, Our Time Together. And this day will honor and celebrate everyday Black life and leisure in Milwaukee. So there'll be a lot of activities that are sponsored by locally owned Black businesses. And finally, May is Member Month, so if you go to our website, mam.org, you can see all the ways that we are honoring our members here at the museum. So, on with tonight's program. I'm delighted to introduce Lesley Vance. Vance has been the subject of solo and two-person exhibitions at the Flag Art Foundation in New York in 2012, the Bowdoin College Museum of Art, Bowdoin, May, and also in 2012, and the Huntington Library Art Museum and Botanical Gardens, San Marino, California, with Ricky Swallow, also 2012. That was a busy year. A lot happening. Vance was featured in numerous group exhibitions such as After Effect, O'Keeffe and Contemporary Painting, the Museum of Contemporary Art Denver in 2019, Painter at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, 2013, and the Whitney Biennial in 2010, Whitney Museum of American Art in New York. Her work is in the permanent collections of the Dallas Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, San Francisco's Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, New York, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and Hammer Museum, Los Angeles, and of course here at the Milwaukee Art Museum, which is why she's here tonight. In 2019, Gregory R. Miller and Company published a monograph surveying the last 5 years of Vance's work. And Lesley Vance lives and works in Los Angeles, but was born in Milwaukee, so welcome home. Tonight, Lesley will be in conversation with Margaret Andera. Margaret really needs no introduction because she started here as a very young one, 30 years ago almost. She began her tenure in 1992 as a graduate school intern and was assigned to work on the newly acquired Michael and Julie Hall collection of American folk art. Over the years, she has curated numerous exhibitions for MAM and facilitated significant acquisitions of contemporary art, including the Lesley Vance painting that you'll hear more about this evening. She has also been instrumental in establishing the Milwaukee Art Museum as a leading American institution for modern, contemporary, and self-taught material. Among the exhibitions she curated are On-Site Andrea Zittel, Uncommon Folk, Traditions in American Art, as well as Vito Acconci, Acts of Architecture. She also curated many Currents shows, Current 36, Dirk Schraber, Current 37, Lawrence Weiner, and Currents 38, which is currently on view upstairs through July 17th with Christy Maston. So, without much ado, I'd like to welcome both Lesley Vance and Margaret. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Bridget. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see everybody here. I want to add my thanks to the Museum's Contemporary Art Society for sponsoring tonight's event. Sponsoring programs around things outside of exhibitions is an important part of our mission, and to be able to celebrate an acquisition, especially from someone who's from Milwaukee, is really an honor, so thank you again for that. And I'm thrilled to welcome Lesley back to Milwaukee, to this institution, as an artist whose work is now represented in the collection. That sounds really good to say. So I just want to walk you through how tonight is going to work. We're going to be in conversation. We're just going to be talking. We're going to walk through an incredible array of images that Lesley's put together of her work, but also other artists' work, and it will give you really valuable insight into her process as well as her work. So I promise you that we'll leave time for questions at the end. So I think we should just dive right in, right?
Okay.
So you came to the Milwaukee Art Museum as a child. So do you want to start? Okay, there we go. So do you want to talk about some of your childhood favorites?
Yeah, so I thought it would be fun because I put together a lot of images of other artists' work to think about the works that I remembered the most strongly from being a child at the museum. And I talk a lot about museums, the importance of museums in my images. So you can be the judge at the end, like what the subconscious influence of these works has been for me. But I have to include the janitor because this is like the most strong memories, being a very small child and coming and finding the janitor, which always seemed to be in my memory, like hid, could never find it. It was like, where is it? Like a scavenger hunt. So that. And then this Julian novel painting, which is now like next to my painting.
I know.
Which is amazing, so funny. But I think I was just like, what I remember about it was like, it was huge. And just thinking like, wow, you can make art out of broken plates? Like, whoa. Anyway. And then this Eva Hesse piece, of course, which is still one of my favorite pieces ever, in the universe.
I look at that sculpture, and when I think about it, if there's anything that might have translated to your work, just remember, as we go through these, just think about layers.
Yeah, I definitely think of all of these early ones. This one stayed. This had the most staying in terms of like the curvilinear, organic, flowing, kind of circular. It's emotional somehow. But it's hard to, but it's very formal. But the emotion is in there. Okay. Fragile, ephemeral.
Yes.
Okay. Dorothy O'Keeffe, of course. Also a huge, influence. I mean, I definitely in my subconscious, being from Wisconsin, one of the first painters I think I ever really learned about in school, I'm guessing. I think I was aware of Georgia O'Keeffe from like birth. It feels like to me. Oh, and then this was a very memorable painting too for me as a child. And this actually, I do think, is a good bridge to. I'm going to very briefly talk about like my earlier work of still lifes, representational still lifes. But this Zurbaran monk, I think Zurbaran painted monks as though the monk was a still life. So it kind of makes sense that that this one is really embedded in my memory.
So I want to ask you before you start talking about these, why still life? I mean, what was the impetus, or what interested you specifically about? Because that's a very specific tradition in painting.
I know. It's a good question. You know what? I can't remember why I started painting still lifes. It's weird. I'm not, okay. This is just 2007, so it's not that long ago. Right. A little bit, I was sort of like teaching myself how to paint, I think. Mm-hmm. I was like learning how to paint. I had not been happy with the work I was making, and then I don't know, why did I start painting still lifes? I'm not sure.
Maybe we'll find out as we go through.
I know why I know from still life forward, but I seem to have blocked out everything from before I made still lifes. Mm-hmm. It was funny because I saw Via Selmans, who's a painter who also started out painting like objects. Like now she's known for paintings of waves and rocks. She said she was teaching herself how to paint when she was painting.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I think something like that. Mm-hmm. But to give you an idea of the scale, I'm throwing in some installation shots. So they're very small, actually, like 9 by 12 to 20 by 30 or something. But you can already see that I was sort of like, how can I make this image look not like what it is? So I was definitely always wanting to get out of the still lifes, but coming up with tricks like putting it on a mirror. I just threw in this. So this is, in this, it's hard to talk about, like, I hate the word influence, but sort of like being a painter, you look at other people's paintings, you've got so many paintings, and then that kind of inspires your own work. But at the same time, you make something and you think, and then you see somebody else's painting and you think, oh, this reminds me of my painting. So it's not like I made the O'Keeffe and I saw this O'Keeffe and then made my painting. It was sort of like when I was putting this talk together. This is a Milwaukee one that the Milwaukee Art Museum owns. And I thought, oh, this painting really like reminds me of that nautilus shell painting for just these formal kind of reasons. So I just threw it in there for fun. But just to show, like now, I think that after I do this talk, for example, of putting this together, I may go back and I'm thinking about this painting, and it's kind of making me want to make a painting where I'm thinking about this painting. But it's interesting. It's like I wish there was another word than inspire, influence, because it's like a cyclical relationship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I almost wish I hadn't put any of these still lives in here. I have to talk about it.
Artists always say that about their early work.
Well, it's kind of fun to be like, okay, I was getting frustrated with that I was making these representational images. That for me, it was like all about the red of the poppies, and I felt like the poppies were getting in the way, and I couldn't quite figure out how to get out of that, Mm-hmm. So I wiped one away, and I thought, in a moment of frustration, and then I thought, oh, there's something here, but I didn't know what it was. And then this is another museum thing, I went to the Norton Simon Museum in Pasadena, California. I was like having an artist crisis, painting crisis, and standing in front of this incredible, this is the same painter who painted the monk that I showed in the original Anyway, and this isn't the best reproduction, but when you're standing in front of it, like the lemons are so otherworldly, all the fruit seems to be kind of like floating away, like it felt like like celestial. I sort of had this experience of like these are like celestial bodies, and this is also in the museum, this Kandinsky heavy circles, and I kind of felt like in my brain I was like, well, if Zurbrand had kept painting this past this point, maybe he could have ended up somewhere like this, which it's not true. It's like not a fact. It's just in my, I was imagining. And then that sort of helped me realize, like, oh, this is what if in my work I painted beyond the still life and I thought about it, I'm painting beyond that. So that's how I ended up here.
So breaking up form a little bit and thinking beyond just the representation of the objects, but the whole kind of, because your work, like this painting, you start to see it fill the whole composition, and it's almost like the objects are exploding into, filling up space.
Yes. Well put. So these are a few, and they get, I think the earliest ones you can still see the traces of what I started with, and then at some moment I realized and this is just to give you an idea of the scale. Still about the same size as the still lifes, like slightly bigger, but not very large. I was also thinking about, I do remember then I was thinking that I was wanting to see, you think about what paintings did I want to see in the world, and at this time I was feeling like I wanted to see warmer, moodier, kind of, a lot of abstraction sort of like jumps out at you, like as the energy is very exterior, and I wanted something more with an interior, intimate experience. But as they go, you can see that at some moment I kind of realized that the still life objects was like a MacGuffin, like not important, like not what it was about, not important, became less and less important.
Do you think it had some, I guess I've always assumed, and maybe I'm wrong, but that it was an anchor in representation to some degree? And does that hang on at all anymore?
Well, I think you'll see that it's tricky. I hate this the distinction between abstraction and representation and figuration. It's sort of like when somebody asks me what kind of painting I do, and I say abstract, I hate it, that answer. So I don't know what else to say. Yeah. I feel like I'm inventing images, and I think that's what. And so it is great. I think because I want to invent an image that feels real, that's perhaps the root in still life.
That's a really interesting distinction too, and it's a really good way of kind of broaching that abstract, that line between abstract and figuration. You're creating a representative thing. It's a new thing.
Yeah. Yes. So, exactly.
Yeah.
I'll repeat this, but I sort of always want. Well, I'm going to wait. But I just think these were in my subconscious somehow. This is Eugene von.
Eugene von Brunschenheim, who all of you know. You've probably seen the work in the museum, and is also from Milwaukee, a Milwaukee artist. I love that you put this in. I was a little surprised to see these when you first sent me the slide deck, but I can see the sort of, I can definitely see the relationship.
And I know I saw these a long time ago. I know he had a show at the Folk Museum in New York in the early 2000s, I think.
Yeah, you would have seen him here before that.
Probably. And I probably saw them here. So, but I do think there's a relationship in terms of like the squeegeeing of paint and this sort of really lush, seductive sort of, and they are also in between that figurative, abstract place.
Right. You're looking at it and you don't know what you're looking at, but you know it's something.
It's something from another planet, I just thought that had a nice relationship. Oh, I was also really, at this time, deep into Juan Gris, this Cubist painter, Juan Gris. I think it was like a realization that you can make uptight, really uptight paintings, and they actually feel more weird and strange than like gestural, goopy, really emotional abstractions. And I'm after that feeling of like, what is this? This is so weird. And I think Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings have that as well. You know?
Yeah.
Something that feels, it's just mysterious and strange. But I was really attracted to how Gris breaks up, composes the picture.
Yeah, space in those. It's everything. It feels like everything's going to fall off the canvas if you're standing in front of it.
Yeah, yes. And also less like, compared to sort of Braque or Picasso cubism, it's more, feels more less still lifey.
Right.
Less
Yes.
based on a still life, actually.
Right.
More
Yes, yeah. Less deconstructing an object and more like
for the sake
composing
of itself.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And I think you can sort of see that in some of my work. And I also was getting more into color. You
Definitely see that.
the colors coming. This painting, I was really thinking of Georgia O'Keeffe with this painting and her kind of like the bone skulls, kind of. I think you can feel it. Where are we now? I feel like I keep talking. But.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so around this time, I also discovered Lee Krasner. I've been a Lee Krasner fan forever, but I discovered her collages. So Lee Krasner, who was a painter, was married to Jackson Pollock and working at the same time. So she made these like gigantic collages and a kind of actually, which were a breakthrough for her too in her own work and how she composed her paintings, but it was similar to sort of I think perhaps I identified with her crisis because it was like she was frustrated in the studio and she hated what she was doing, and then she ripped everything up and threw it on the floor and then left and then came back after a trip or something and was like, saw them on the floor and thought, wait, oh, this is something. So I'm into the act of destruction is good. It's sort of like, sometimes the best things happen in a painting when you think it's a lost cause, and then often I'll be working on a painting and it's like, it's boring, or I don't think it's working, and then as a last-ditch effort, I'll sort of do something or destroy it or do something crazy, and then often that's what that's how the painting ends up becoming what it is going to become.
Yeah. So when we first were acquiring your painting, I was showing it to a couple of groups who around the museum, and this was back in COVID times where everything was virtual, and so that's part of it. But there was a particular group that I was talking to who could not be convinced that your painting in our collection was not a collage. They were convinced that it was a collage, that they were looking at layers of things built up, and I kept saying, no, if you stand in front of it, it's just a painting. There's no layering. And they were, so it's great to see these Lee Krasners.
That's great, yes. Well, this is sort of how I realized, I hadn't thought of, I was breaking apart the space in a certain way, and I hadn't thought about them as like, now I sort of think of them as inverted collages, but I hadn't. It was sort of like discovering these made me understand what I was doing in my own work, better. Made me understand how I was composing the space and what I was doing. Anyways, also how she uses, they're just great, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can a little bit see like the using black as like this is as when I kind of figured it out. Mm-hmm. This is from where is it? What is this from? This is from 2014 now.
And is this still that intimate scale? Is this?
And you can see, I think that I at this point, this is still the intimate scale, that, not sure how much, like 20 inches probably. Okay. And then, let's see.
So are you playing with, darker colors and the lighter colors? Like, are you playing with how you can define space and the sort of foreground, background?
Yeah, so in these, yes, the reason I showed these after the collages was I was thinking about black is the negative space, and I was thinking about like what I start with, which is the kind of squeegeed areas or the areas of, I don't have a pointer, but the paint, which is the brushwork, where there's the movement. That's how the painting begins, and then the solid areas are painted around them.
And what are you using to paint that one area?
Just a medium.
Okay.
They're all oil paintings. I should have said that, actually. They're all oil on linen. Anyway, but I like that, when you said he couldn't convince him that it is a collage, like I think about it, my paintings are super flat, like I don't want anyone to look at them and trace the steps backwards, or I like that, I think painting is like opposite, there's like a lot of opposites at play always, like it looks multidimensional, it's flat, or it's, it's moving, but it's still, it's organic, but it's inorganic, It's super flat and smooth, but you can see like the weave of the linen when I scrape the paint away. So there's all these decisions that go on when you're making a painting that you would never, as a viewer, be conscious of. But that's what makes the painting.
But it's interesting because that's one of the questions that people always ask about paintings, especially if they're standing in front of it for a while, is like, what does the artist paint first? Where do they start? What's the first kind of gesture on the canvas?
Yeah, and I never know if I should keep it a secret.
I know.
It's hard because I don't want to give the mystery away, but I've given it away to you guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually there's a painter I love named Charlene Van Heil, who I have images of later, and I went to her studio in Marfa, Texas, and I understood more what her process was, and then when I was at MoMA looking at her painting, I was like deconstructing it, and I was getting annoyed that I knew. I thought, maybe I shouldn't tell people. Yeah. It's just going to annoy them. Yeah. But anyway. But I do think you can really feel like the collage, like my conscience. I was thinking about the space, like the collage, and then this one, this is the painting where I realized, like, oh, Magritte. I'm thinking about Magritte, who was also a favorite painter when I was a young child. I think I saw a Magritte show at the Art Institute a long time ago, and it stayed with me. But one of my galleries is in Brussels, Belgium, and he was in my studio, and he was like, oh, Magritte. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about it. So René Magritte, who's a surrealist, Belgian surrealist painter, and I'm not sure what year this would be from. I'm not sure. We're not good with years.
We determined that earlier. But you're looking at this less for the subject matter and less for the sort of surrealism of it, more.
Exactly.
You're looking at this for space.
Yes, and then I realized like things I was doing spatially. So this is an example of where it's not really, it's sort of like what I was painting made me look at Magritte. His comments sort of got me thinking, I should look at Magritte more. Yeah, I guess I am. I guess there are things Magritte is doing in his work that remind me of things I'm doing in my work. And so that got me looking at Magritte. And then I was just reading an interview with Philip Guston, actually, and he was kind of being down on me. He wasn't being down on Magritte. He was talking about the difference between fantasy and enigma, and that Magritte dealt more with fantasy, which sort of was below enigma in his mind.
Really? So there was a hierarchy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. sounds like Philip.
Yeah, he was like, "Don't get me wrong, I like Magritte a lot, but I have my limits."
That's funny.
But I disagree. I think they were just so enigma being like something mystery, mysterious, this undefinable sensation kind of. And I do think some of Magritte's paintings are more fantasy, but I kind of think of Dali in the fantasy zone and Magritte. What I love about Magritte is his formal, the formal play with space, and this kind of feeling you get like something you know, but you don't know.
Mm-hmm. You don't know, and that is what happens in your paintings a lot when you're standing in front of them, and you think you understand it, and you think you understand what the planes are, what the space is, and then in our painting, that pink ribbon runs through it and completely undermines your understanding of it.
Yes, thank you. So that's what I'm after.
It's intentional, see?
And that's enigma.
That's right.
It's when you know, either you don't know it and then you go, but I think I know it, or you think you know it and then you realize you don't know it, you know. But yeah, you can see kind of these are more Magritte paintings. These are more strange paintings. Mm-hmm. But still, there's things you recognize, like the wood grain, the weird furry, I don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. And, for me, these have the quality that I'm always after in other people's paintings as well, is sort of like I enjoy paintings of things that they feel real, but they feel like they landed on Earth from another planet, basically. Mm-hmm. You know. I just put this in because somehow I thought there was some kind of fun relationship, but you know, there's no direct relationship. But you know, when there is, I'll tell you. But it's sort of like a. But I think you can see how I'm using the space, and how I'm. So the scale, so I'm scaling up a little bit too. These are like 36 by 28-ish.
Is this the Bartolome show?
This is Hufkins, Sylvia Hufkins. So this is my gallery in Brussels. I keep showing images from there because they have such a beautiful space where you can really tell how big things are.
So the scale is growing. So what is it about what you're exploring in your work that's literally pushing the boundaries of your surface?
I think I'm starting to realize like what I'm really interested in, which is this kind of like formally what I'm doing. Also, obviously there's no still life anymore. I'm just kind of like I start with I don't know. It could be something. It could be still life. It could be inspired by another painting by someone else, or another painting by myself from my past, or something I saw on a walk. You know, I kind of like, and then I don't know why I just decided to make I think I just decided like to not complicate my life and make them all the same size, because like there was so much to explore. I know I also have a thing of like I don't make any paintings that look the same, or I'm a kind of painter that tries, like all my paintings are very different from each other. Mm-hmm. But I think I thought, why complicate things by also having another scale?
Right.
It's not complicated enough.
I actually always read that with your work as quite disciplined too. You know, that you're using the same. You're exploring something, and this is still a smaller scale when you think about, how big contemporary painting can get.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on in these smaller paintings. Yes. And so is it a matter too of like getting comfortable at this scale? Or were you, when you first started, just in these kind of, we'll call these the medium-sized paintings? Yes. Did you have to sort of settle into that, or was it like you kind of knew that this was going to be a temporary moment and you were going to keep growing? I
mean, I never know what's going to happen, so I don't, I'm making like, all of a sudden I started making really tiny paintings again. So I don't know, who knows, you know. But I was enjoying, I did have a sort of like this kind of gigantic paintings. Like I kind of I want to paint paintings that I can carry, you know, that I can put in a house or easy to put in someone's house. They can, like there's nothing nicer than seeing if I go to a collector's house and I see my painting up, you know. It's like it's wonderful to see a painting in a space people live in, you know. I mean, not as wonderful as seeing it at the Milwaukee Art Museum.
It could be equally wonderful, Lesley.
It's a different wonderful.
Yes, right.
Yeah, just something against the sort of like paintings that are like you see in like a bank lobby, you know. But I don't know. I have never really thought about it as I'm only making. There's no there's no reason. That was just the painting that the size I was making. So also, this is hard because like things are happening. I'm sort of like broke up my talk now in terms of like categories, like color, and so will. Getting into the.
This looks familiar.
So now there's 2 images of the works in the room where my painting is in my talk.
That's right. This is also hanging in the gallery that Lesley's painting is hanging in.
I wish I had seen this when I was a child, but I don't think this was up.
We had it, probably.
Yeah, but I don't know if I think I would have remembered it. Do you know if it was up?
I'm sure it was up.
Really? Mm-hmm.
But I definitely see a lot of similarities in this work with your work, especially just first of all with color, obviously, but also the way that the space is defined through color, but then also the way that your eye is led through the painting with certain other devices. Like there's sort of this ribbon or this line that kind of takes your eye through. There's I'm always surprised every time I see this painting, every time I walk past this painting. It's such an active painting, and it just feels like it's going to kind of burst off the sides of the canvas. And you have to kind of remind yourself that what you're looking at is two-dimensional. It's paint on canvas.
Yes, and it's so like the surface is really like gnarly.
It is.
But she definitely didn't paint fat over lean.
No.
She didn't pay attention to the rules of how you're supposed to do it. But then all the cracking and everything that becomes part of it, and I love that part about. I love that about it actually. But so I was getting, all of a sudden I got really into Elizabeth Murray. That's why this is another Elizabeth Murray painting. It was, and I've read that especially this time period, which is I guess the late 70s, early 80s. And I read that she was at this time thinking about paintings as a container for color, and I didn't know that. I just read that recently, but when I was that's what I was responding to with them, I think, because I was just getting very into color and the possibilities of color and what you can do with color. And this is a direct relationship. I was sort of obsessed with this painting for a certain amount of time, and this is sort of my painting in response to it. I guess it's different, obviously, but it's my paintings. They follow their own rules. Once I start, I don't know what the rules of the painting are, but it tells me when I start making it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the color is very tricky. Also was very into this sculptor, ceramicist. This is ceramics. This is clay. Named Ron Nagel, who is amazing with color. I don't have much sculpture in here, but I look at a lot of sculpture also.
It makes sense when you look at your paintings and you see, and it's interesting that you choose a sculptor who also is kind of fooling what you're looking at.
That's true, yeah.
You don't understand this material when you're looking at it. You have to sort of
exactly. You don't know that.
But he also works in layers, like he puts things in front of other things in the work.
Yes, and he was like best friends with Ken Price.
Right.
I have images of Ken Price a little bit later in a different section when I talk. But but yeah, and also another thing, aside from the color, it's sort of like how he's making an object that you don't recognize, that feels as though it came from space and landed here, but that it always existed. You know, it's that feeling of like, oh, that, you know, of course. Which is sort of when I'm working, I'm always wanting.
And I like the combination of texture too, because you do that in some of your paintings too, where you intimate this sort of smooth, but then there can be kind of a rougher application.
Oh, and also I suppose it's, you know, formally too, like his paintings, there's always, in my paintings, everything's always together, like coming together. Everything is very, everything's touching. So that is a thing in my paintings. I think Ron Nagel's are also like everything's sort of touching.
Yeah.
But I had a friend who was telling me, like, I was comparing my painting to a different person, and he said, in your work, everything's touching, and in her work, nothing is touching. It makes sense. Their personalities.
Oh, really?
I won't say that. Anyway. We're still in the color. Okay, so I'm also getting really into color. We're still in the color. I'm still talking about color. Colors that sort of vibrate, but not so much that you can't look at them. It's like a fine line.
And are you arriving at this through experimentation? Are you looking at other, I mean, I'm sure you're looking at other work and to see what it does, but are you experimenting in your studio about how colors react to one another?
I'm definitely experimenting in the studio and looking at other paintings. It always changes no matter what color. I think I'm starting a painting with certain colors and then they change. And I go, oh, that was going to be these colors. But this is Raoul de Keyser also. But this is a direct relationship, actually. I'm going to be in a show in Belgium later this year at this museum in Austin, which is like Raoul de Keyser and artists who love Raoul de Keyser. Mm-hmm. And this is a painting that I said, well, this is the one painting that I was thinking about these two paintings when I made it. But it's kind of like the connection's pretty, I think I was thinking this one, I don't know the title of it, the minty green, this kind of animal, something furry and mangy about it. But anyway. Okay, so this also is a huge person for me. Carla Accardi, who's Italian, who just died in 2014, I think. And these are from the late 60s. Also, like, up there with Elizabeth Murray in terms of kind of importance for me. She's like, at this time, she was making these, like, in Italy in the late 60s, so it's like there's a lot of movements, like Arte Povera and Forma, a bunch of movements going on. But what I actually first discovered her work in a show called Oranges and Sardines at the Hammer Museum, curated by Gary Garrels, which was a show where he invited artists to make rooms of other artists' work that they wanted their work to be in the same room as. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's sort of like what I'm doing in my talk, basically. Mm-hmm. Kind of like, so this was in Charlene Van Heil's room,
Oh, really?
Yes, so that was how, and I told her that, and she was very excited that, that it had that.
So she works with these kind of colors that are, that vibrate,
yes,
I think.
and very minimal. I also have this thing where I don't use a lot of color in my work, I use a pretty minimal palette.
Mm-hmm. But this is also something that intimates language or semiotics, but it's not. It's invented. It's an invented image.
It's an invented image, like strange calligraphic. Mm-hmm. Looks like a language, but it's not any language. It's really strange. But as objects, they're not that big. These are kind of modestly scaled. But when you're in front of them, they have a lot of impact. But so I do look at her colors a lot, actually, from that period. It's sad there's not that many, though.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. I'm just going to whip through these, but I'm always after sort of like what I want a viewer to spend time with my painting and not just walk by it. So a lot of, I found myself getting really involved with sort of this optical play, this sort of illusionism, which I don't really mean to, but I do mean to, but it's kind of like I want the viewer to like get stuck in my painting and not be able to leave. Like,
well, you certainly build in enough of these kind of mysteries that we always say, well, every artist wants you to spend time in front of their painting,
right?
For various reasons. The Christy Mattson show upstairs is kind of the same but an opposite example, where she's working with textile and she's building up these colors, and you think you understand the color, but you get close and it's actually 10 different threads that are building up this color. Your work is rewarding in that same sort of way, where you think you understand the kind of spatial relationships, or even the color, or where one color starts and stops, but there's a drop shadow or there's something in it that is always making you want more, dig. It's like an excavation.
Yes, and I like colors that are sort of in between colors. Like I use a lot of is that blue? Is that gray? Is it orange? Is it red? Is it green? Is it blue?
I look at some of your paintings and they have colors that are, I don't know what the right word is. It's not unsettling in a bad way. But it's unsettling, like it's not like my eye doesn't understand like why this color is next to another color, and I love that, because you don't rest easy. Like you're not satisfied, which I think is also a part that makes you kind of keep wanting to look.
Yes, thank you. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but you can, oh, here we go. This is a fun color one.
Yeah, this is.
So I made this painting, and my friends saw it, and they said, "Oh my gosh, Fouquet's Madonna," and I was like, "What? I don't know." And they said, "You were looking at Fouquet's Madonna," and I said, "No, I don't even know that painting, but maybe I do somehow." And I suppose I learned about it in art history at some point, at some moment. But anyway, so this is an example of so then it gets me looking at this painting. But I think you can, I sort of I was telling Margaret that I look at paintings, like when I'm going around a museum, I sort of I don't even care who made it or when it was made or the history of the thing. I'm sort of can I use this in my own work? Or does this remind me of something I made? It's sort of very selfish. But and that's how it's a sort of for me, there's this sort of level, every experience is sort of very formal, I think, or it's experiential when I go to a museum, that I'm not, so when I was doing this, I put all this whole talk together, and I was like, I don't know what the dates are for any of these.
But in a way,
nobody asks.
What I like about that, too, that approach, is that it shows that for centuries, painters in particular have been looking at or solving for some of the same kind of formal or color issues, or using the medium in a particular way. So there's something to it, because this is a 15th century painting.
Yes,
and,
this is 15th century.
Yeah,
and this looks like, it could be made today. It's a very, the space is very, it's like a science fiction sort of situation. And it, it's like you can think about both the, the blue is space because there's no shadows in the blue, and it's similar in this painting, actually. But then what's so bizarre is that the cherubs, then there are blue cherubs that blend into the sort of emerge from that background. And then it gets you, and then the blue of her dress, it all becomes sort of, there's a strange, it's a lot of opposites are happening in this painting at one time. So kind of and that, it's very much like porcelain, isn't it? And the movement is very circular. But it's what would get one to look at this painting longer and spend more time with this painting, because what's happening. Do you have anything else to add about that?
I don't. It's just that I love that painting. It's such a great painting.
I mean,
for
it's
all the
great.
reasons you just.
It's a great painting. And color. Color is, color is like color is something funny because it seems like fun and easy, but it's actually so hard. And it's like, it really takes over. If the colors are wrong, then the painting is failing. So color and composition, they're on one plane of importance.
Right.
I always, when painters are playing in all black and white, I think, God, it's so easy. Another important painter for me is Thomas Niskowski, who just died a few years ago. I don't know when this painting is, so probably all from the early 2000s-ish. But he also uses, it's good to have him in the color because he uses weird colors that don't really work together. Some of his paintings are pretty hard to like. I've got some pretty likable ones in here. But this sort of feeling of like movement and, there's strange things happening that you have to stop and think about what's happening? And I think he sort of hides how he got to the end of this painting. Like in this painting, I kind of imagine where the blue is. He probably had painted something. It looks like the outline of like something else that he had painted and maybe wiped out, and then that became, So it's sort of like I look at his work a lot because he also makes a lot of paintings that are very different from each other, and
he's a great draftsman too.
Oh yeah.
Is that something you do when you're making paintings? You draw first?
I don't draw first. I do watercolors though, but I don't do studies. I've tried and it's not worked, but I might be now. We'll see.
Something new.
We'll see. Anyways, but this is Niskowski also. This is like my favorite Niskowski painting. But it's how like if you try to sort of trace the steps back and figure out how did he make this painting? When you first look at it, it seems obvious, It's like, oh, there's that paint. Oh, he did it this way. And then if you really think about it, you think, no, wait, that's not how he did it. Or that's not the order he did things. And I love how the white becomes, the background becomes the foreground with that kind of like white shape where the blue is jutting out of.
So I'm checking time, Lesley. So
Yeah.
we should keep going.
Keep going. Okay, you can see that this is like the background, foreground, Okay, very quickly. I wanted to throw this in there because I saw also this Hawaiian featherwork show at LACMA. These are from, I think, 18th century, I believe. But and this like knocked my socks off, I have to say, the show. But it's sort of I realized that that these things were being activated by the movement of the feathers. That this is like what it was about the works that were attracting me so much. And also Ken Price. This is a connection. This is like a weird artist connection, but also Ken Price, who I talked about earlier, who's friends with Ron Nagel. So these are from like early 2000s. He also died like 10 years ago. And they're all ceramic. And these really feel like they landed from were made in another universe and landed here. But what I love about them, what I respond to is how the color, he makes the colors by like the surfaces are very tactile, and then he paints, he was like a surfer, and I think he discovered it from how they make surfboards. But it's like many layers of paint, and then he sands it off and leaves it. Explain that.
Right.
Does that make?
Yeah. So it doesn't look like fired. This is fired clay. It doesn't look like that. Like it's a surprise to.
Yeah. So because how he made this color is by sanding. So it's by the movement of his hand over the surface. It really, there's the motion there. So it's like, and that's what activates this very still sculpture. It would be very still if it wasn't for that, And I think I made this connection. I realized like, it's like, because I had been like, what is it about this like squeegeeing, this paint, and then I sort of realized this is the engine of my paintings, like that's that's what activates. It's sort of movement becoming like a thing, you know?
Yep.
Hope I'm not putting it. Anyway, does that make sense? Is that a
Yes.
crazy connection?
No, I love it.
So this is inside the artist's mind, these connections. Anyway, but so yeah, realizing just like, so this is the painting, that this is what the engine that makes the paintings is, the initial kind of movement of my body, you know.
And in a scale like this, it's a physical process, but does the physicality of your painting change with a larger scale?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it is less. It does. Yes, I'll get to that. Oh, this is Charlene Van Heil, who I talked about.
Yeah.
This is an important painting too for me. It's also like you can see all the work I'm drawn to. It looks like it's something, you know, real, but it's not. You know. And she also works in kind of collage. They're almost like inverted. They're almost like collage, how she works. So you can't trace the stuff. There's weird layering. You can't figure out how she made them. You can't trace the steps backwards. And they're wild, super wild.
And the way she kind of used patterns to kind of divide the canvas up, which is something that I think you did, but I feel like your recent work is kind of away from that. It isn't as much of like quadrants. It's more, I don't know, maybe that's just.
We'll see. Yeah. I did move away from. Okay, Arthur Dove. I just threw in because I love Arthur Dove. Yeah. But I think that they're both. It's sort of like I think it's abstract. It's abstract, but it feels figurative. It feels representational, but it's not. Right. And I think it just shows you this is in the Milwaukee Art Museum's collection, and this is, I think what draws me to Arthur Dove is like it's the same thing. It's sort of like, but the other way. It's sort of like, why do we have to call it abstract or representational?
But he gives it away with the title. If he had called this Untitled, you might not read it.
Exactly, that's true. Sunrise. Right. I don't ever title my paintings for that reason.
Exactly. Yeah.
What time is it?
Keep going.
Okay. Okay. I can't remember what I was gonna.
So are these still that kind of medium size?
Medium size,
yes, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
This I wasn't looking at this when I made this, but when I was putting this together, I thought, yeah. And I wanted to throw in, this is a new discovery. I actually discovered her here when I saw this painting up, Gertrude Abercrombie.
Mm-hmm. She's having a resurgence. She was friends with John Wilde and Aaron Bowrod, the kind of influenced by surrealism, but magic surrealism is, I think, or magic realism, I should say. And she's from Chicago, studied at School of the Art Institute.
I was making a lot of I was making a lot of paintings sort of with this kind of like hairy kind of brush work, which I don't have much to say about that. It's just kind of like, I think hair, it's like organic but inorganic. It's that thing of like opposites. There's something so like wild about hair, but also can be very tame, groomed. There was somebody who wrote an essay about my work, said like he compared it to, or he was talking about a Chicago artist named Christina Ramberg, and he said, did you read,
Yeah.
An artist, he said like your paintings she proposed the question to her class, what would a comb that could not untangle hair look like? And he said something like, your paintings, like my paintings. And I like that as a description of my paintings. Like a comb that cannot untangle hair. Okay. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense, but and this is in the Milwaukee. I saw this at one Christmas break at the one holiday at the Milwaukee Art Museum, and this did actually inspire. Like this got me like, I want to make a painting with these kind of stripes. So.
And the optical illusion of op art, is that something that you were? Did that, because it feels like over time it's becoming stronger and stronger. and stronger in your work. Do you feel that, or is it something that you just have been exploring in different ways?
Well, I'm exploring it in different ways. It has become strong, perhaps too strong for the future. But that's what I'm thinking. Right now, I'm in my mind. I'm sort of thinking I'm going to move it. We'll see. I don't know. But it sort of just happened to me. But I love the feeling when you look at a painting and you're like, how?
Yeah. Like this is, I mean, the clean edges are what, like.
Colors are totally wrong on the screen, by the way.
Yeah, it's a weird. But the very kind of crisp edges of this really is what starts to play with your, as you're standing in front of these, and you really think that there's this dimensionality, and the drop shadows, but also the colors, these kind of color combinations that are they're arresting in a way.
But it's also like, I was thinking about it like, because the ribbon underneath is not, you don't see it underneath the, the lighter colors. So it's not logical, but anyway. Once in a while, I really get into something and I make a few paintings a little slightly similar. Oh, okay. So also in addition, this is actually glass. This is just something I bought in LA because I was just what is that object? I love that. It's like an Italian Bernini 1980s vase. But I was so drawn to it that that's how I made this painting. I mean, it inspired me to make this painting. So it's not just other art, it's objects like.
So we should fast forward a little bit. I mean, it's hard to fast forward.
Oh, you know what? We're getting towards the end, I think. Yeah. We're getting towards, I'm not going to, Hilma Klimt, another painting hero. But around this time, I saw her. I've been a fan of her work since the early 2000s when I saw a show in London. But there was a show at the Guggenheim. Maybe some of you saw it.
Great exhibition.
Amazing show, actually the most attended show ever at the Guggenheim. But it got me thinking, and this also Elizabeth Murray painting that was up at the Whitney, that I desired to see this painting bigger, actually.
So that was that kind of moment of like...
That was a moment.
Yeah.
There was a moment of the Hilma show and the Elizabeth Murray painting and this yellow painting that I desired to see larger. That made me think I'm gonna just do it and go bigger, and try it and see what happens. And so I did.
So this is the show at Kordansky where they're larger.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so then we get to the Milwaukee Art Museum painting. So this was, I was thinking about this painting I'd made a few years earlier. Obviously went a completely different direction, but this was like my favorite painting in that show. This one is like, I think what's so great about this painting is how the line, it's like the line creates the space and the space creates the line in a way, like there's, and a line is so, it's like, it's really solid, but it's also floating away, it's also doing the thing of opposites that I was talking about, but.
It's so interesting the way that the way you read the color too, because it feels, it's flat.
Yeah.
The paint is so flat, but you're creating such depth and illusion with it. And partially it's it doesn't feel like a heavily shadowed painting, which is often, so that to me is why when we saw the image of this painting, it's an absolute technical mystery because all of the kind of conventions that painters can use to depict space or to fool your eye, you're not using them. You're using other combinations. First of all, I think the color combinations. This is the painting I think of when I think about unsettling, again, not in a bad way, but in an unexpected way. Your eye doesn't rest, and it isn't satisfied. And so you've got that kind of color contrast going on. But then as you start to look, you start you get on the pink ribbon roller coaster, as I call it, where you think you know where you're going, but just sit there and now just look at that pink ribbon and tell me where you go. And tell me, first of all, which direction you go in.
Yeah.
It's a painting that is a challenge. It invites you in really interesting ways as well. But like, there's not a lot of shadowing in this. So how is this? How are those spatial illusions built?
I don't know.
It's almost, I think about film in that filmmakers know that in your brain you make these connections, so they don't have to show you that in film. I feel like the ribbon is sort of like making these connections, and we're connecting it in our brains, and we're doing some work.
Yeah, and I think that you know what, you look at it and you just think, okay, that's background, that's foreground, and then you go, no, wait. Mm-hmm. And it's something else, it's sort of like, it rewards longer looking.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, and it's the thing where I started with that pink, with that kind of gesture of the rope, and then the rest of the painting, happened around it, but it's hard to explain. But I always feel like I'm just helping the painting come along, And it's also something like the more I work on a painting, the farther away I feel from it, which is what I'm after, actually. Like, I want to feel like the painting made itself, and that I'm just sort of helping it become what it is. So facilitator.
Right.
Yeah, that's like the magic when that happens. But like. So there's a moment when it switches where, okay, now I'm just...
So
anyway.
Just before we move on from our painting, so I just want to I want to thank again, Bridget said in our opening comments that Tony and Sue Krausen were generous enough to help the museum acquire the painting. And they did so, Tony and Sue are very generous to the museum, and they did so in honor of Riva Shovers, who was someone who was integral to our contemporary program, and she loved young painters, and she loved artists who pushed boundaries. And so I know Tony was thinking of that when Tony and Sue decided to honor Riva with the purchase of a work of yours. But I think it's just such a great match for the museum and in Riva's honor. And I want to just mention Riva's family's here tonight, and it's great that you were here to be able to attend this. Okay. So let's keep going.
Okay, let's keep going. So this is the first painting I was like backlit. Mm-hmm. Just to give you an idea of the scale again. Elizabeth Murray again. Oh boy, what time is it anyway? Yeah, so also I do make black and white paintings. I wanted to throw in, I saw there was a Martin Ramirez show here that I was lucky enough to see, and that was a huge, had a huge impact on me. I wasn't familiar with his work at all. Do you want to talk?
I'm interested, what was the impact on you? Because this seems like, Ramirez's work is really dense and patterned, and but he's making a lot of doing a lot of spatial play.
I think it's like I'm also really into these Kuba cloths, these from the Congo, which a lot of artists are into.
Is it the opening of the space?
It's a similar thing.
I
think it's like the intuitive geometry or something. The kind of and the feeling of space and movement. It's sort of, it becomes I don't know. So these are these Kuba cloths from the Congo that they've been making since the 17th century. And then what I think what it is about, it's the same thing as like Thomas Miskowski, this thing of, you look at it, you think you know what it is, it's a pattern, but the pattern sort of falls apart. What you think you are looking at falls apart the longer you look at it.
Right.
So there's a lot of things don't make sense, and you follow a line and then it's like stops making sense.
Yeah.
Which I love. Oh, here's Magritte in his studio with Kuba cloths. Anyways, okay. So
So now these are more recent.
These are more
works?
recent,
Yes.
and I had been thinking more about these actually when I was making, I've been making, I had never made sort of work that was sort of like all over, and not a central motif, like a central form. So I went through, I for the last like year, I've been making paintings that are more like that, but I might be, let's see.
There's a lot of white.
A lot of white, yeah. That's what I think my show at Kordansky was so dense and heavy. And I just wanted to just use a lot of white. I thought, what will happen if I use white? I haven't used white in a long time. So, that's what it is. I'm not a painter who keeps doing the same thing. I kind of often react against what I just did. So, I might be ready to react against this, actually. But anyways, but yeah, I have been using a lot of white. And then I recently in New York saw this painting of Elizabeth Murray again. And she's most known for these kind of like crazy, like sculptural relief sort of shaped canvases. Yeah, that's the right word. And I think it got me thinking as I just made this painting about sort of, I don't want to make shaped canvases, but I could treat I made this painting after I like saw that painting. And I think I kind of was thinking about like the white of the painting being an extension of the wall,
Yep. Yeah.
Something like that. This is a crazy painting.
A lot going on in it.
It's going to be showing in Hong Kong. I think it was in my mind that it was like.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yes. So, okay. So, and then this goes to right now. I'm going to do a presentation at this art fair, Art Basel in Hong Kong, with an artist named Anna Zemankova.
Zemenkova.
And these are works that are actually in the Milwaukee Art Museum's collection. What a good painting. And who I don't know where she worked up until. These are from the 60s, I think.
Yeah. She started working later in her life.
Until the 80s.
Yeah, and
through the 1980s. Right?
Yes. But it's so, I never thought of the connection between your work and hers until I saw this slide deck. But her work is obviously rooted in botany, but none of these are identifiable. They're not real. They're sort of imagined or invented flowers or plants.
Yeah, and I first saw her work at the Venice Biennale like 15 years ago. Yeah. There was a Venice Biennale show which dealt with a lot of outsider artists. And like Hilma F. Klint was in that one. And was EVB in that one?
Yep.
EVB
was there too, yeah.
And I was just so into these. I think it's that same thing of sort of like, what am I looking at? I don't know. It feels like something I maybe recognize, but then no, I don't recognize that at all. And they're just so elegant and beautiful.
So you'll be showing, your work will be with...
So I'll be showing my work with her work, yes. And I had it's boring, long story. And knowing I was doing that, she has these fantastic, very tiny drawings, which are like 5 inches, like that I'm going to be showing with. This is a bigger one, but she also makes very tiny drawings. And because I knew that, I thought, I'm going to make some tiny paintings. That would be nice in dialogue with her. So it's not that tiny. It's like 9 by 12-ish, or no, 10 by 14 maybe. But so then I made a series of those pretty recently, and I really love them. So I don't know what it means for the future.
So these are all from the last year?
These are all from the last couple months.
Yeah.
But I am going to make. I did actually make this one a bit bigger.
So this is a slide that we put in at the end, and Lesley didn't know about it. So today we had our junior docents who go through the museum and they pick a work of art to respond to, and someone had chosen your painting.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool.
So that just happened
Then they
today.
made a really good painting.
Yeah. All right, I think that's the last image.
Okay, that's the last image. Sorry, everybody.
So we have a few minutes for questions, if anybody has questions for Lesley. I'm happy to repeat it. Yes.
Yes. I should have had some in here, but I didn't. No,
Let me just read, because it's hard for people to hear. The question is, she makes watercolors. Are they studies for her paintings?
They're not studies for the paintings. Oh, there actually is a watercolor in here, actually. Wait. It occurs to me. They are sort of premise. Sometimes, like, here's a watercolor. So they can be sort of premises for a painting sometimes. Like I like I made this, I sort of thought, okay, I'm going to make, and that, like, this painting is kind of based, it's like a premise, you know? It's like, I'm going to make a painting. Does that make sense? So it's not a direct study. Like, I can't, it doesn't work to do a study because that would ruin the gestural kind of, but it does, with the large ones, it does help to sort of have a premise. I don't know how else to describe it, but it just changes so much. I mean, it doesn't, and this is really the most direct, actually. Usually it ends up going totally off-road.
Yes. So the question is, do you work on one painting at a time, or are there multiple works happening at the same time?
There's multiple works happening at the same time, but I only work on one painting in a day, or I work in stages with the paintings, like in different layers. So if I'm going to do a show and I'm going to have a few paintings, I'll start with the very first step on each painting. And then, because that's the only sort of way to get them with drying time, like get them done in time. And it also helps to not like get too obsessive over one painting, because I can get too obsessive over something and need to just like walk away and go to sleep and then see it with fresh eyes. So it's like I'm not bopping around my studio working on different paintings at different times, you know, but I am working on, they're all happening at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh, totally, yeah, that showed. I was actually like, I should have put in some James Nares slides. I didn't know about James Nares till I saw the show here, but I was like, yeah, it was really, yeah, it was really like, I was really into it, yeah. Yes, also huge. The Matisse cutouts show, I actually realized when I was done, I was like, oh, Matisse cutouts. And then I was like, just stop, Lesley. I can't do this forever. Keep adding things forever. But yes, the Matisse cutouts, like huge, yeah. Definitely.
Yes. It's Cinco de Mayo.
It's Cinco de Mayo, yeah. I know what you have on your mind. There is a lot of movement. I mean, I think I like movement. I'm thinking always about movement, and I want movement to be happening at different speeds, like slow. And fast. You know, there's some paintings I look at, it's all fast, and I kind of can't handle looking at them. So I like when there's parts to rest, or just things slow down and things speed up. And it's like I think de Kooning, like late de Kooning also. Yes. I don't have any late de Kooning in here. That was another thing I should have had. But I do listen to music. I also listen to like podcasts. I can't listen to anything. It's you know, as an artist, you like create these situations that help you make your work in the right way. And I listen, you know, so I can't listen to anything emotional. Like I can't listen to the news. I can't listen to anything that like I get emotional about. You know. I have to but it's good to listen to something that I can not really listen to, but listen to, like, it just skims off the top surface of my brain that gets too maybe obsessive with it. It's hard. Yeah. I hate this question. No, I always get asked. It's such a hard question to answer because paintings take different amounts of time, So,
Let me ask you this: does it depend on scale, or can smaller paintings take just as long?
Scale matters when. So it's sort of like there's this. I think when I make my paintings, like it's sort of like. When you walk into a dark room and you can't see anything, and then slowly your eyes adjust, and then you see what's in the room, sort of, as you get used to the darkness. Like, that's how I feel when I start a painting. I'm like, I don't know what this is going to be. I have no idea. And then slowly, stage by stage, I sort of see what it's going to be. So there's a moment where it is what it is, and then that moment, the large ones take longer. But it sort of takes the same time to figure out the composition and to birth for the painting to become what it's going to be. But then the bigger ones do take longer in terms of like when I'm finishing them. But yeah.
Okay, one more question. Yes.
Oh, I go. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I go to my studio. It's like, yeah, no, I have like a set schedule. My husband's also an artist, and we unfortunately, like for both of us, like we make our like the best time in the studio for me sort of between. I mean, I'm there from like 10 or 11 to like either 6 or 9. Like the best, but the hours when I'm the most productive is sort of between like 5 and 9, which is not great timing for like family dinner, or like watching television shows, because. So I imagine maybe I keep wanting it to change, but I can't get around the fact that this is when it's like the best for me. But like some people work best at night, like that's not me, sort of. But
Lesley and her husband Ricky hosted the Contemporary Art Society. We were on a trip to Los Angeles. It was years ago now. COVID makes me condense time, but I think it was in 2020.
Yeah.
You were so gracious in welcoming us to your studio. And it's interesting because Lesley's husband is a sculptor, and the relation between the space, the studio's all in the same building, but the work is really
but separate,
different.
Very separate spaces.
Yes, and the work is very different.
But there are resonances,
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight, and thank you, Lesley, for making the trip to Milwaukee.
Thank you for inviting me.